I think it's important for us to be able to have the both and, the both holding on to our faith and our relationship with God and healing from these toxic beliefs, being able to separate what is true and of God and loving and good and what was man-made and used to control me and shame me rather than what God's truth is. It's so important to be able to separate those and really, for those who want to be able to hold on to their faith.
Welcome to the Fresh Start Family Show. I'm your host, Wendy Snyder, powerful parenting educator and family life coach. And together we are going on a journey to help you expand your heart, learn new tools, and strengthen your family so you can build the family legacy of your dreams. I'm a mama too turned child and family advocate who went from being extremely stressed out back when my strong-willed little girl was a toddler to now thriving as a parent and having the honor to support thousands of families each year who choose to go from frazzled and impatient to peaceful and empowered. Each week, we will dive in with experts, thought leaders, authors, and advocates with insights to help you thrive in your parenting walk, as well as in your marriage and even in your career and faith walk too. Together, sometimes alone, sometimes with my better half and co-host Terry, we'll explore the triumphs and trials we all face as parents and share practical tools to fill our hearts, minds, and souls with inspiration. Take a deep breath and get ready to be poured into with some fresh start inspiration. Let's do this. Hey families, welcome back. I'm so happy that you're here. Today on the show, we have Dr. Camden Morgante, who has a new book out called Healing from Purity Culture. I guess it's not so new anymore. It came out last fall, but it took a minute for us to get her on the show and publish this episode. But I just love her work so much. I have admired her teachings and her voice for quite some time now. So it was such a joy to interview her. And we talked about how we can parent through deconstruction or an evolving faith season and keep Christ at the center. And so if you are a family of faith, you, I think, are really going to enjoy this episode. Even if you're someone who did not grow up in purity culture, you'll hear a little bit more about my story. I did not grow up in purity culture. I did not grow up in religion or a faith-based environment at all. My faith is something that I came to know as an adult. And so even if you aren't someone of faith or find connection to Christianity, I think it's still a really interesting conversation for you to hear other people's stories, right? Especially people who are courageously choosing not to pass down what we believe now is harmful or hurtful that was taught by high control religion. And so that is Dr. Camden's story. She has a lot about what being raised in purity culture was like and how she has decided that she is not going to pass that down to her children. And she does such incredible work in the world to help other people heal from what it looks like to be raised in those high control purity culture environments. So just to share a little bit more about Dr. Camden with you, she is a licensed psychologist with nearly 15 years of experience as a therapist and a college professor. She owns a private therapy practice and is a writer, speaker, and coach on purity culture recovery, egalitarianism, and faith reconstruction. I love that word, reconstruction. I have a tendency to think of myself as an evolving Christian as my faith has grown. I've learned more and more about what I want to support, what I want to be involved with, and also what I'm a heck no on. So that term I really like, reconstruction, evolving. Some people relate more with the term deconstruction, but I just see it as anyone who is really taking their faith seriously. And instead of just blindly obeying or just kind of following along and not asking questions, they're actually really drawing closer to God and saying, does this really align with who I believe God is and the way my intuition and my heart is guiding me to understand? Or am I realizing as I grow older, just like so many of us re-examine belief systems that we might have inherited as children, but then once we grow up, we realize wait a second, we don't actually believe that, or we don't want to take part in that harmful or oppressive system anymore. And so that's the beauty of adulthood. We get to make our own decisions and live a life that is truly in line with our moral compasses and our hearts. So Dr. Camden's amazing. You're going to love this conversation. We talk about so much great stuff. And so without further ado, help me welcome her to the show, and make sure you go get her new book, Healing from Purity Culture, because it really is fantastic. Again, even being someone who was not raised in the religious world, especially the purity culture world, I still found it really, really fascinating to learn about what it's like for those people who are raised in that. We have so many families here at Fresh Start Family that were raised in purity culture and are recovering from it in their third, fourth decades of life, or trying to heal their marriages or recreate the spark of intimacy, even though they have just a lot of like wounding and baggage and stuff that has carried into their relationships in their marriage that they now are realizing. And I will add that data, Sheila Gregoire has done a ton of data that you'll hear Dr. Camden and I talk about in this episode to really prove, quite honestly, prove how purity culture harms marriages, harms intimacy within couples. So I just find it so fascinating to learn about this stuff so I can fully support my clients who really have the deepest desire to have a close, intimate, connected relationship with their spouse, but also are shedding these beliefs and healing from some of these messages that were given to them in their youth. So thanks for listening. Thanks for being loyal, just supporters of the Fresh Start Family Show. We see you, we honor you, and we celebrate your bravery to raise your kids with compassion, firm kindness, and connection. Enjoy this episode. Hello, families, and welcome back. I'm so happy you're here, and I am just thrilled to be here this morning with Dr. Camden Morganti. Welcome to the show, Camden.
Thank you, Wendy. It's nice to meet you and finally get to talk face to face.
Oh, yes. This has been an episode coming for a long, long time. I feel like you and I have been connecting on the internet for probably years now. I think admiring each other's work and cheering each other on. And finally, we get to have an interview and really get to know each other in a deeper capacity. Listeners and viewers, today we're going to be talking about parenting through deconstruction, keeping Christ at the center, because I know that we have so many families from all across the world who are either an evolving Christian or they're in a season where they're starting to question some things that they were taught and raised with, especially when it comes to parenting and discipline. That's kind of like the thing that starts to open their eyes a little bit to, oh, okay, maybe I was taught some stuff that has not led to my thriving or my family's thriving. And so I know so many are going to really just be excited to hear about your experience, Dr. Camden, and especially when it comes to purity culture. That's going to be one of the biggest things we hit, of course, because Dr. Camden, your new book is out into the world, Recovering from Purity Culture. And my goodness, I'm not all the way through it yet, but it is absolutely incredible. And I'm so inspired by you. You did it. You wrote a book.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for, your kind words, your encouragement, and engaging with it.
Yes, absolutely. So we're going to cover three things today, listeners: healing from purity culture and raising kids with a healthy sexual ethic. We're going to also talk about how to disengage from submission culture that you might have been raised in, or that is currently even being taught in your church environment, and approaching parenthood as a team, as a true team. And then thirdly, we'll chat about leaving instant obedience culture behind, finding courage to choose compassionate discipline over punishment. But we are going to cover a lot around purity culture, which is what your book is all around. So Dr. Camden, would you just start our conversation off today with your story? Tell us a little bit more about why you are so passionate about serving people in this capacity. Tell us all the things. How did you get to this place where you are today? Tell us your story, please.
Yeah. Well, thank you. It's been a long journey to get here for this published book to be in my hands right now. And it's funny because I had a comment on Instagram the other day, like, I wish this book had been around 20 years ago, someone said. And I totally understood what they meant. But my response was, well, 20 years ago, I was 18 and I was quite steeped in purity culture. So I couldn't have written this book. I would have written the
Yes.
opposite of it pretty much. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, so I grew up very conservative evangelical and steeped in purity culture and hierarchy, gender roles called complementarianism, where men are in charge and women are submissive. And that was just kind of the norm. But my personality never really fit that. But I was a rule follower. So purity culture fit my personality. I was very much attracted to being a good girl and following the rules, and this idea that I could control the outcomes by following the rules, that I could guarantee a fairy tale or happy ending if I did everything right according to the purity culture rule book. So I read a lot of purity culture books growing up in the 1990s and 2000s. I had a True Love Waits ring and took a pledge, an abstinence pledge. And I just really bought into that, followed it wholeheartedly. And I didn't date until I was 18. And I had my first serious relationship, first kiss, first love. We dated for almost 3 years at this small Christian college that we attended, where it was the norm for everyone to get married really young and really quickly. But we dated for almost 3 years. And then we broke up. He broke up with me, and I was heartbroken because I was, in love, and that's just devastating emotionally. But my faith was also really devastated by the breakup because
Mm.
it brought into question so many of these false promises of purity culture and that guarantee that I was taught about, if you do the right thing, then you can control the outcome. You'll get your fairy tale marriage and spouse, and you'll never be heartbroken. You'll never have baggage. Yeah, so it took me into a period of deconstruction, really. That's when it kind of started for me. I went straight from undergrad into my doctoral program. So got my doctorate, became a psychologist, and through that process, seeing clients who were dealing with all types of suffering and trauma that I had just not experienced in my relatively privileged life, like just had not experienced a lot of the religious trauma and church hurt that people had gone through,
Mm.
the sexual abuse and trauma people had gone through, the LGBTQ discrimination that some of my clients had experienced. So
Yeah.
that really opened my eyes and shifted a lot of my beliefs, and including with purity culture. I still kind of held on to my faith in God. I still held on to some of my values about the sacredness of sex. But
Yeah.
yet, a lot of the reasons for that shifted. It became less about guaranteeing these outcomes, and putting all my hopes and faith in these false promises, and more about, I feel, an authentic connection and personal relationship with God. So then I
Mm.
met my husband finally and got married when we were almost 30, which is quite old here in the South. I know that that is normal, probably normal in California and normal in other places, but
Us
in the,
progressives.
yeah,
We're getting
but
married at like 50.
yes, yeah, I know. For some people, I'm like, well, they're like, that's average. I'm like, but in my cultural context here in the conservative Christian
Yeah.
South, going to a Christian college, like I was pretty much one of the last in my friend group. And I'm so thankful for my husband now. We have two children, and I'm grateful for, yeah, for them in my life and the blessing that that is. But it didn't take away the pain that purity culture caused me, and that
Mm.
set me on this path of, I want to help others to see the harm of purity culture, to see that these teachings we were given were myths, but also to hold on to their faith through that process. And as a
Yeah.
psychologist, I felt like I had something unique to offer that not every book was just able to address, when people are writing based on their own personal experience or like a memoir of their journey, but they're not a mental health professional. Like I just felt like I had something
Yes.
unique to offer with that. So my book includes some of my personal experience, but really it's more centered on tools for mind body integration and healing, and case studies of clients that I've worked with, and yeah, and stories from interviews that I did. So yeah, it's more of a combination of the professional and personal experience.
Oh, so beautiful. I'm seriously so inspired by this book. And just I can tell you're someone who just you do your work in such a way that helps save faiths, right? Like I've had that a lot from my clients where they've said, Wendy, you or Sheila's work, and they've name dropped you too. It's really helped me save my faith. Like
Hmm.
because of this work. And so I love the way you do your work, and I love the way that you really help people hang on to their relationship with God, because holy
Hmm.
smokes, is it a bit, I mean, it's just mind, what is a good synonym? What is a good rhyming word for that? Mind fluffery. It's mind
Uh-huh.
fluffery. Like when you put all these things that we're going to talk about today into one bucket, and
Yeah.
you're like, wow, being raised with that is so
Hmm.
intense to heal from that.
Hmm.
And once you realize, like, oh my goodness, this is really off. And I just know from working with my own clients from all over the world, the the immense amount of harm and suffering and that came from that type of deep, like strict legalism or
Mm-hmm.
fundamentalism or
Mm-hmm.
strict evangelical upbringing. It is just so beautiful to watch people step into the healing that happens. And
Mm-hmm.
in my experience, so many people do become closer to God, right? Like I know
Mm-hmm.
deconstruction, people have attacked it just like they've attacked compassionate discipline or gentle parenting. But it is, in my experience, what brings people closer to God quite often when they're fully
Mm-hmm.
supported in a
Mm-hmm.
way where they can fully heal. And so your work is just so important and to bring in that training and that expertise that you have in
Mm-hmm.
combination with it. So thank you. Thank you
Mm-hmm.
for everything that you do. It just means so much to me for someone who helps so many people out of the immense suffering that this kind of upbringing has created.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's important for us to be able to have the both and the both holding on to our faith and our relationship with God and healing from these toxic beliefs, being able to separate what is true and of God and loving and good
Yeah.
and what was man-made and used to control me rather and shame me rather than what God's truth is. It's so important to be able to separate those and really for those who want to be able to hold on to their faith. And I always say to my readers, like, your faith will not look the same after deconstruction, and that's okay. Don't be scared of that
Yeah.
because it's going to lead to a deeper and more robust faith that's just more complex and isn't satisfied with black and white answers anymore. And so to somebody else, it may look like you've fallen away, but really you've stepped forward. You've moved forward into a deeper level of understanding and spiritual development.
It's so true. What I love about being in this position where I get to interview incredible experts and healers and helpers of the world like you and Sheila, we've gotten to interview Sheila and Rebecca a few times who, do so much beautiful work in the purity culture healing world. But it's so interesting because I was not raised in the church. I found God when I was 19. I came to know Jesus kind of on my own when I was in college here in San Diego, California. But I can come at it from such an angle of kind of curiosity
Mm-hmm.
and my justice button is the reason why I do this work, right? So the
Mm.
reason why I have this conversation is because I know it's so important to help people have healthy faith experiences and also to raise children in healthy faith, right? Meredith Miller's book, it's like one of my favorites ever, is how to
Mm-hmm.
raise your kids in a faith that they don't have to heal from, right? Is that the
Yeah.
essence of it woven?
Mm-hmm.
And that is why I think it's so important to have this conversation today because we have a lot of families who, yes, were raised in purity culture, and then others who were like, we weren't raised in purity culture or it wasn't thick, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then we become part of churches where we
Mm-hmm.
realize, oh, there's a essence going on here and there's things being taught or conversations or youth group. And so I think it's so important to just be educated and to know that you want to be able to steer your child in a healthy way and be aware that these are the things that could be still to this day being taught at your church that you just want to be aware of. Does that make sense? Right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of
Right.
people just aren't aware of it and so they send their kids to youth group
Mm.
and maybe I was just walking with a friend the other day and she said, I send my kids to a Christian school because I just don't feel like I have the time to nurture their faith, like busy single mom.
Mm.
So she's dropping kids off and not necessarily always involved in what they're
Mm.
teaching, but just to know that there's probably a good chance that this could be being taught and to be aware of it, I think is so important. So,
Mm-hmm. And I love the perspective you can bring too, Wendy, because that can give us a reality check that these things are not normal.
right.
When you didn't grow up in
Yes.
it and you're hearing it for the first time, like I have a friend of mine who's a therapist here who didn't grow up in with a strong faith background. And she called me and she's like, my client said she heard this phrase, modest is hottest. What does that mean? And I was like, oh yeah. And like I've heard
Yeah.
that so many times, but to her that was new. And so she had this strong reaction to her client, which was actually really validating for the client to see like this is not normal. Like this is
Yes.
actually weird, So it can be
Yeah.
helpful to have your perspective.
Yeah, I love that. It's true, right? And
Mhm.
I think I can talk about a lot of the stuff that we talk about, whether it's compassionate discipline versus punishment or this, because I'm not triggered. I'm not triggered by it at all,
Mm.
right? So
Mhm.
I love having this conversation. I feel like it's a real honor. And yeah, so all the things. Okay, well, our first point, when it comes to parenting through deconstruction, Dr. Camden, keeping Christ at the center, healing from purity culture and raising kids with a healthy sexual ethic. Tell us what to do here because I know your book is so beautiful. Yes, you share your story and your expertise, and so much of it is the how to. How do you heal
Mhm.
from this and or also make sure that you're raising kids with a healthy sexual ethic? So I know this is a big question. Let's dive in.
Okay, yes, this is a big question, a big topic. The last chapter of the book is called Parenting After Purity Culture. So that's the one that is most focused on parenting and raising kids. But don't ignore the first 12 because I say the work really has to start with you. And whether you grew up in purity culture or not, certainly if you did, this is all going to be applicable to you. But even if you didn't, I had a writer friend read the book. I think she said, I didn't grow up as a Christian, so I didn't know how much of this I would relate to, but I wanted to read it to support you. And she read it and she said, like, that I was weeping through parts of it because this stuff is in our broader culture too. This idea that you're
It
damaged
is.
goods if you have premarital sex. I have 5 chapters, one on each of 5 purity culture myths, and one of them is the damaged goods myth. And that's something that's not just in evangelical purity culture. And so that was something that was really healing for her to read. Or one of them is the gatekeepers myth that pits men and women against each other and all these gender
Yeah,
stereotypes. That's in our broader culture too. Like that's not just in
true.
evangelical Christianity. So I think this book could be relatable even for those who didn't grow up in it. But definitely the parenting chapter is going to be the most focused on that. And as you were talking about raising kids with healthy sexual ethic, yeah, it really does start with doing our work first to heal our own shame and knowing what we
Yeah.
believe, knowing our own sexual ethic first, because that's going to guide us on what values we want to teach our kids. And borrowing from our friend Meredith Miller, like she says, doing nothing isn't neutral. Like, so
Right.
I've some parents will say, well, I don't want to do purity culture with my kids because it was so harmful to me. So I'm just gonna kind of like, give them sex ed, but then kind of like let them figure out what they believe and kind of, like that's between them and God. And I get that because we want to avoid the hyper control of purity culture, but also doing nothing isn't neutral. Like they're gonna hear it somewhere. And it's better for you to kind of guide them and give them a little bit of that guidance at the same time knowing that they have autonomy to make their own choices and decide for
Yeah.
themselves what they believe one day. Does that make sense? That's a both and too of like both I think it is our job to guide them and to instill these values and lessons. And I know my kids have autonomy and agency to make their own choices.
Absolutely. And again, not being immersed in it and reading your book is absolutely applicable. Like it is like I just love it. I love learning about it because it is so thick in our culture. And we
Mm,
know that a lot of times the evangelical church does
mm,
drive culture like right
mm,
now. Like we're
mm,
seeing it, right? Like the concepts,
mhm,
the myths, the things that they create a big deal around, like holy smokes. And so it helps to make sense of how we got to where we are, right? But what I've always been, it's been interesting to me to watch over the years is how sex is like it's like the most human. Like, obviously, it's how we all got here, and it's like
mm,
the best thing ever. It's like the ultimate feeling of euphoria and joy, right? Like all the things. But for some reason, it's been like shamed. Like it's this like secret thing. And I think the church has so much to do with that. And it just really blows my mind on how we got to the place where we are, where it's so hard to talk to your kids about
mm,
it and so embarrassing and they're so and I don't know what your perspective on this is, but it feels like there hasn't been something taught of like healthy desire and like goodness of sex. Like
mm,
is that missing in the church in your opinion?
mm,
Or because when I think about healthy sexual ethic, and I actually had a friend say something at the beach once, she was the coolest chick, and I don't think she was Christian, but she was a widow and had just really interesting perspective, and a 16-year-old also. And she asked me, so Stella, how are you teaching something about Stella? I mean, we just went deep right away the first day I met her on the beach. And she
mhm,
ended up saying something like, are you really teaching her about how much she matters as she's starting to date, and like her desires and her satisfaction and her joy are like so important. And I was just like, wow, I've never thought about that. And no, I
Mm,
am not having
mhm,
conversations with my kids to be, and I do to some extent, to like, it's the best thing ever. Like I tee it up as it's amazing. It's amazing.
mhm,
It's going to be the best feeling ever. And we do. It's later in life once you're mature and you have these healthy relationships and blah blah blah. We have our whole way, and I'm going to learn from you today too. But I like the idea of teaching that it's beautiful and amazing when it's done
mhm,
right, which I've heard
mhm,
in the purity culture world or evangelical world. It's just like the patriarchal, awful, painful, like you don't really matter as much as
mm,
I matter. So that's a
mhm,
lot to put on you, but
mhm.
let me know your
Well,
thoughts.
I think that's interesting, Wendy, because we were taught that sex was like dirty, bad, wrong,
Hmm.
sinful, like you don't do it at all. But then once you get married, you flip a switch and sex is going to be amazing and mind-blowing and pleasurable. And I push back against that. I call it the flipped switch myth because
Yeah.
it's not always the case. I have a sex therapy practice. I do more than just that in my therapy practice, but some of it is sex therapy with couples who did wait. And sex has just never been easy and never been what they were taught to expect. It's not amazing and connecting like they want it to be. And so holding space for them and making space for their grief is part of their therapy journey. So I think with our
Mm,
kids, we do want to teach them that their body is good and beautiful and that sex is good and beautiful. I think
yeah.
that is important not to demonize sex, but I would also caution against idolizing it because I think that's what purity
Yeah.
culture did. And again, that sets up these outcomes of if you wait, then it
True.
will be amazing. And that's just not reality for a lot of people. So I think it's what you're saying is great about like sex and your bodies are good and beautiful and we don't make it this taboo or this dirty topic, but also we want to equip them with sex education, with skills to learn how to
Yep.
communicate because that's really what makes sex
Yes.
great. It's not just that you waited that makes it great. It's the communication, it's the sex education, it's the teamwork, it's the connection, like all of those things. And
Yes.
so we want to work on those qualities too.
Absolutely. That is so, so important. And yeah, she had mentioned that day. She's like, I really want my daughter to be able to communicate. And I
Mhm.
was like, this is so interesting. I've never thought about this. But yes, that's what I would want for
Yeah.
my daughter too, because I am so grateful to have a spouse who just always cared so much about me and not just
Yeah.
about him. It didn't, none of us came with the package of purity culture, right? To me, it feels like it would be very hard to flip the switch and have it be this wonderful thing because it is so vulnerable and it's so like if you had it teed up at all as any type of like shameful if it's not perfect, right? Like if
Mm,
there, I can see how because I look at obviously child development, human development, the way our bodies take on shame, that
mm,
if there was any type of that happening or
mhm,
shame, like any of that, how just to flip a switch and move into, oh, this is beautiful. And we're going to have this healthy communication and it's going to feel wonderful. And I matter just as much as the guy matters, which is our next thing, disengaging from submission culture and approaching parenthood as a true team. But just to stick to that flipping the switch, it sure
mhm,
feels like that's going to be a way higher degree of difficulty if it's not teed up as a beautiful, healthy, normal part of life that's
mhm.
taught in a different way.
Yeah, what I hear you getting at is the mind-body connection. Like, because our mind and
Yeah,
body is so
exactly.
inextricably linked and integrated, these messages from purity culture and the messages of shame and fear really become embedded in our bodies. And
Yes.
so, like, I have this, I say, once we get married, our minds may know that sex is holy and like allowed, but do our bodies know it? Our bodies can't just flip that
Yes.
switch, even though our minds do. So it really takes a lot more mind-body integration and embodiment, which is like the act of living in your body rather than being distant from it. Sorry. It
Yeah.
takes more work on those skills in order to have a healthy and holistic sexuality. And purity culture really was a divorce of the mind and body, a complete disconnect. And so embodiment is one area that is majorly affected by purity culture and something that requires just a lot of practice to rebuild that relationship with your body.
Okay, let's talk real parenting for a moment. If your home sometimes feels more like a war zone than a peaceful sanctuary, and your strong willed child feels like they're constantly pushing back, I want you to hear this loud and clear. You are not a bad parent. You're not broken, and your child is not out to ruin your life. I know. It sure seems like that sometimes, doesn't it? You're exhausted because you're actually trying so hard, but you're using hand-me-down parenting tools that weren't effective back then to get long-term results and aren't effective now. Plus, the fear and force tactics that most of us inherited were never going to work for the beautiful, bold, determined child you've been gifted. That's why I created Thriving with Strong-Willed Kids, a completely free quick start learning bundle that's changing the game for families everywhere. Inside this bundle, I'm going to teach you how to calm power struggles without punishment or threats or yelling. I'm going to help you communicate in ways your child actually responds to, no matter how strong-willed they are, and finally feel empowered and responsive as a parent instead of reactive. Inside the free learning guide and interactive 1-hour workshop, I'll help you flip the script to stop seeing your child as too much and start seeing them as exactly who they're meant to be. Remember, you're not failing. You just haven't been given the right roadmap yet. So you can grab your free bundle and choose your workshop time at freshstartfamilyonline.com/power. Let's rewrite your parenting story together.
Yes. And then, bringing in the whole like the modesty messages and
Mm,
like, the boys are uncontrollable and it's like the girl's job to like cover up and all these things. And
yes.
again, raising a teenage daughter right now where Terry and I weren't raised in it, but we know about this whole world. And I see her sometimes and I'm like, that's amazing. I am not concerned at all about like her sports bra and, tiny shorts that she wears to beach volleyball. She's a competitive beach volleyball player.
Mm,
And but again, I can just imagine how it would be if you were raised in that and you were fearful of judgment that when you practiced your sport, you were tempting young men.
mhm,
Like it's just not a thing, right? Like for us,
mhm.
but I can imagine how much fear and shame and questioning and doubt that would put into you. And then you get married and you're supposed to walk into a room and be like, hey, what's up? It's just
Yeah.
like, it doesn't work that way, right? Like
Yeah.
if you've
Yeah.
integrated these messages of fear and shame, and then all of a sudden, so I love that. I'm not to that flip the switch chapter yet, but I can't
Mm,
wait to get there because I think that's going to
yeah.
be really, really fascinating.
And what you were saying about like pleasure and desire, I think people, ask me in interviews, like, how do we teach our kids? And it's hard to give like one exact answer because so much of this is really taught in other values. Like it's not taught by explicitly saying to your daughter, your pleasure matters. Like you should be treated, well in sex. It really starts much earlier than that with you modeling that to her. So I think of little things like when my kids tell me in the car, like, Mommy, I'm hot or I'm cold or the music is too loud or too quiet, I say, oh, thank you for telling me. I'm glad you noticed your body. And like, then I'll make adjustments,
Yes.
if I can to what they're asking, because that's already planting the seed that you can listen to your body, you can trust it, you can communicate those needs to other people, and they care and will respond. So does
I
that make
love
sense
that.
how it's a
Yes.
completely
Yep.
non-sexual thing, but yet I'm already planting that value that can then transfer when she's older into sexual pleasure and desire. Or another example is we're potty training my 2.5-year-old son right now. Um,
Yay.
and we say, listen to your body or check your body. Do you have a pee-pee
Nice.
feeling? We teach him like what that feeling feels like, and and just to listen and check in with his body. And I'm thinking this is I'm developing, helping him develop a relationship with his body, where for both my son and daughter, their genitals are not bad and dirty, and we call them by the right names, and they touch them and they have a relationship with their genitals. And of course, we pay attention to hygiene and appropriateness and things like that too, but
Yes.
we're not shaming them for those behaviors. So I think those are just the little seeds that you plant, even with young kids like mine, that will pay off later when it's time to talk about the bigger sexual values.
Oh, I love that. I love it, Dr. Camden. Okay, so good. All right. Well, we'll probably come back and forth, integrate purity culture amongst this whole conversation, but talk to us about disengaging from submission culture and approaching parenthood as a true team. That
Mm-hmm.
is a lot of times not what we grew up in, right? Where mom was like submissive to dad, dad wait till dad gets home, dad's going to do
Hmm.
all the spanking, and mom's kind of powerless to have any control over these kids. It has to be dad. And then you add in the purity culture in the bedroom that comes out and all the things. So how can we disengage from submission culture and approach parenthood as a true team, and why?
Yeah, I think that's so important and I love it. And I don't get to talk about it that much. So I'm glad we get to talk about it because I'm so passionate about being a team and being equal partners in our marriage. And that has made such a big difference in my family and our parenting experience because both of us are fully involved as caregivers, caretakers to our kids. And we both have careers and are fully involved in those too, and in ourselves, our own personal development. And I love that my kids are getting to see this equal partnership and to see that dad and mom are, both involved, both pick you up from school, both help with these things, put you to bed, all these tasks that
Yeah.
normally a mom does. My husband does too. And we make decisions together as a team. And that really started from day one with him taking paternity leave and staying home as long as he could. Like, I'm a big proponent of you start with this equal partnership and this equal parenting as early as you can. And of course, the experience of pregnancy, delivery, postpartum, like there are certain things that can't be equal, that he just couldn't experience. But as much
Yeah.
as he could, he was by my side, helping me with breastfeeding and, supporting my healing, postpartum healing and things like that. And being home with me and our baby. So yeah, it's so important to model that and then for the church that we go to, we switched churches a couple of years ago because we wanted to be at a church that had a female pastor too, and that my daughter could hear a female preach on a Sunday. And it was so powerful and for me sitting beside my daughter in church when she was 5 years old, like the first time she heard a woman preach on a Sunday, because normally she's in Sunday school,
Mm.
but that day in particular, she decided to stay with us and our female associate pastor preached. And I thought to myself, man, I was 35 the first time I heard a woman preach on a
Wow.
Sunday. And how empowering and how healing it is to be able to give my daughter that experience that I didn't have. That's really the work of reparenting yourself too, to be able to see I can give my children the skills, the tools, the knowledge, the experiences that I never was able to have, and that heals me in the process.
That is so beautiful. And I
Mhm.
know I've seen you and Sheila kind of you use these big words that are not in my zone at all, but complementarianism versus
Yeah.
egalitarianism. Is that right?
Yeah.
So
Yes.
complementarianism is the that kind of traditional submission culture. And
Mhm.
then will you tell us just about those two real quick?
Yeah, complementarianism is the traditional gender roles where men and women are thought to complement each other but are inherently different and have both have value, they would say. Both are valuable and made and loved by God, but they have different roles. And so women are
Mm.
excluded from some roles and excluded from having a full and equal voice in decision making in church or
Yes.
in home or sometimes even in society. And egalitarianism is the belief that men and women are equal in value and in role, that there are no roles closed off to women or to men. That yeah, we work together as a team, with no one being a hierarchy just because of gender. That things are based on like skills and your abilities and your, like in the house, I would think like housework, like that's based on just how much time we have and our abilities, not based on our gender.
Yes.
Or in the
Oh, I love
workplace,
it.
it's based on like your skills and abilities and not just because, well, he's a man, so he's the one that gets to teach or preach or lead. Yeah, so
Yes.
those are the
Discipline.
terms and yeah, yeah.
Okay,
So
thank you. Yeah. And again, the complementarianism was often what went along with the purity culture, right? That
oh
was often, and then
yes.
of course the godly discipline that included hurting and harming kids. Like that was kind of the lineup, right, in the traditional evangelical world. And we do for those for even if you're listening and you weren't raised in purity culture or this world, like you can see it in the world now, right? Like we
Hmm.
see very loud people on political stages talking about how dad's very angry and he's going to come home and spank the other political parent or the other political candidate. And you're like,
Mm,
wow, this is a
mm.
thick belief system that that's the way it's going to work, right? We have a woman who is challenging and she's going to get in trouble, and angry dad is going to come home and spank her. And these are full
Mm,
grown 50, 60-year
yes.
old people, but they were raised in that world. So they think that that's like healthy Christianity. And
Uh-huh.
really, to many of us, it's become terrifying. It's become terrifying for those of us who have unpacked this and realized that that is not the world we want to live in or the world that we want to raise our children in, but to know that it is out in broader culture. And I think it's important to be able to see it and teach your children about that. And then also help them understand that we choose to live a different way that is more of
Hmm.
this egalitarian way that
Hmm.
is completely in line with Christ and our faith. So I love that.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, these three topics that we're talking about, Wendy, as you brought them up, I make the argument in the book that purity culture has a foundation of patriarchy, that that's really what underlies
Mhm.
that, and modesty culture as well. And of course, patriarchy is this complementarianism we're talking about. But
Yeah.
as we're talking, I'm thinking really what underlies all of them is hierarchy and control.
Yep.
Because when you're talking
Exactly.
about the discipline, the control discipline, like the spanking and all of that, like that's about hierarchy with parents at the top and they're the authority and instant obedience and respect, and children's don't matter as much, their feelings or their needs. And it's control because it's easier to control and gain immediate compliance and obedience when you use, physical force. That
Yeah.
can
In
seem
the
like
first
that is.
decade, maybe not the second, but yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. So I think that's what it's all about. There's a lot of fear-based in this. Like, I
Yep.
say purity culture was fear and shame-based. That those were the tools of control. And I think we see that in that traditional style of parenting as well. It's a shame-based parenting.
Yeah, and before we move on to this compassionate discipline last subject, I just would love to riff on this for a second. Why do you think this happened? I mean, it's just like, what in the world? Like, how did we go from Jesus and his teachings to fear and shame and
Mm.
hierarchy and control? I suppose it always was like that, right? But like, why do you think it got so like it goes down this train of this fear and shame and hierarchy control when it's like I am an optimist in of nature, right? Like my true nature is just an optimist. And I just don't believe people are trying to create this whole world and control women and harm people and hurt children. Like they're not trying, but they get sucked into this. Like as a
Mm,
psychologist,
mm,
what is like I understand when you're raised with fear and shame, like it does something to the brain, right? But
mm,
like, is that just the answer that when people are conditioned with fear and shame and they've had it modeled to them how to feel powerful in by overpowering others, right? Like that's how they get their power needs met. Is that just become addictive, and then all of a sudden you have pastors leading mega churches that thousands of people are attending that they think that they're doing wonderful work in the world? Does that question make sense? Like, what is your opinion on that? Like, how the heck did we get here? Why do
mhm.
people go down this train when they are Christ believers? How does that happen?
Yeah. Well, at this level, I think it's what you're used to, like what your nervous system has adapted to.
Yep.
And it's when your nervous system adapts to something, that's what feels normal to you. And so you
Yes.
continue perpetuating it, even though it's not working for you anymore in adulthood. But really, fear is at the core of all of this. And when I think about just the human species, like this drive to survive, survival of the
Yeah.
fittest, like we had to have fear. It served an adaptive purpose to keep us surviving, to keep us from things that
True.
are dangerous and to help us survive. And um, yeah, so I feel like this all comes down to fear. And
Yeah.
fear is a powerful motivator for adults and kids and a powerful tool to control.
Yes. And then I see what happens in this world when people get called out or, and they don't take responsibility, right? And they
Hmm.
don't change. Like we know that there's
Hmm.
more churches that will not take responsibility and
Mm,
change than
hmm.
there are that are like, you know what? I was
You're right.
I
Yeah.
for 30 years I led with this message and I'd like to change that, right? Like you just don't see it as much. But I would say probably fear of judgment and fear of being wrong is
Hmm.
probably like they've never been educated or guided or mentored or healed on how to feel scared and act in a healthy way, right? Like there's just these knee-jerk reactions, but it seems
Mm-hmm.
like even fear drives that because
Mm-hmm.
like when people won't even budge to have a conversation on some different issues, it seems like the fear of being wrong might be at the top of that too. So it's
I
kind of
think you're
interesting to
right. Yeah,
riff
the
on
fear
that.
of being wrong, and that's why they wouldn't even want to listen to an opinion that is different than theirs, because that could possibly cause them to question if they're right or wrong, or that could introduce information they don't have. And there's fear in that too. So then you get to this very polarized and black and white thinking, this world that we live in. And
Yeah.
we see that just, yeah, in the world, but also in religious circles. Black and white thinking is just so so rampant. And part of
Yeah.
deconstructing that is developing the both and thinking instead.
Yeah. And then there's also the fear of the afterlife, burning in hell, that
Mm-hmm,
also
mm-hmm,
gets
mm-hmm.
brought into this, right? So if you
Yeah.
are wrong, you're not only maybe going to burn in hell, but you're going to send other people to burn in hell. Like that's a
Yeah.
real fear for
Mm-hmm,
people. So that's interesting to hear your thoughts on that. That fear is really at the base of all this. And then to hear
mm-hmm.
about the hierarchy of control and the shame. It's so spot on. Okay, our last subject that we're going to chat about is leaving instant obedience culture behind. How to find
Mm-hmm.
courage to choose compassionate discipline over punishment. And you know, I teach about this all day long, but
Yes.
I just always wanted to hear more about your experience and how I've seen a little bit of your story about how you were like, no, we're going to do this differently and feel really
Mm-hmm.
good about it.
Mm-hmm.
But what does that look like for you? And what would
Mm-hmm.
you recommend from your expertise as a psychologist for anyone listening?
Yeah. Well, you are the expert on this, Wendy, but I can share, yeah, my story and like, yeah, how this has become so meaningful for me. I always knew I wanted to parent differently because I saw the way I was parented and how that harmed me, and I think really fostered an insecure attachment style to my parents. And then learning as a psychologist about attachment style and secure attachment, that being the goal. And I've read a lot of Dan Siegel's work, and I'm sure you do too, and would recommend that. And but attachment is so important to health and to success and flourishing in life. Like it drives so much of having healthy relationships and even academic success. And so before I became a parent, like I made it my goal, like I want to be as healthy as I can be. Of course, that's an ongoing work, but I want to be able to have a secure attachment with my kids, even if I didn't have one, because the research says if you didn't have one, you're more likely to have an insecure attachment with your kids. And so you really have to do the work yourself, to be able to have a healthy relationship and secure attachment with your kids. So for me, having a healthy marriage is a huge part of that. I know not everybody has a partner, or a healthy one, but for me, that's been a big contributor to being able to be healthy in myself, and having that secure attachment with my husband gives us a good base to co-parent together, and to have a healthy relationship with our kids. But I just wanted connection based, and not fear based, with the discipline. And I just see emotion regulation as one of the most important parts of being a parent, regulating myself so that I can help my kids learn how to regulate and identify their emotions, because that's the work I do as a therapist. Like emotion regulation is a
Yeah.
big part of therapy and why people come. And so, yeah, so I see that as one of my biggest like jobs as a parent, is to keep them safe and to help them learn to have a healthy relationship with their emotions. So it is more demanding of me as a parent, I think, than instant obedience parenting. And you were saying like maybe for the first 10 years it's more effective. So that's where I still am right now. But I am, yeah, hopeful that I'll have a better relationship with my
Oh,
kids in the
you will.
second decade because of the foundation we've laid in that first decade with them, and that we won't have as much of the mother-daughter conflict in teenage years that I had as a teenager, hopefully, with my daughter,
Absolutely.
because we have this secure base now. So yeah, so it takes a lot out of you as a parent. And so that's why I always say, you have to do your own work first, and you have to have good self-care and good boundaries and good support. Not everybody has that. And I know that can be hard to find, but it feels again so healing when you didn't grow up with that, to be able to give it to your kids and to be able to do something differently, choose something differently, to see the fruit of that. Yeah, it's wonderful.
Oh my gosh, that's so beautiful.
Hmm.
It is, and it is so fun throughout the years as your kids get older, as you start to see more and more and more of the fruit. And now
Mm.
my little guy just turned 14 on Monday,
Oh,
and my little girl turns 17 on Saturday. And
no.
it is
Oh.
so fun. Like this
Mm.
stage of life, you know, that first decade, you're kind of trudging and you're like, oh my gosh, is this even working? You know, and you have all these like, you know, aggressive people who write the articles, gentle parenting isn't
Uh-huh.
biblical and it's
Uh-huh.
weak and all the things. And you're like, am I crazy? Am I taking crazy pills? Like, is this actually going to work? Are they actually
Mm.
going to? And then the second decade, when you really stay dedicated, that second decade comes along and you just start to see, holy smokes, like I've raised a different type of human, you know, and it's
Mm.
just, it's so much fun. And yeah, the rewards are just so massive. And then just riffing on that, like first decade when it feels like it demands more and it takes more or that it's harder. It's interesting because, you know, I just look at the season where I was doing it and it was short. It was like I found this work when Stella was 3, but we were like from 2 to 3, we were disciplining with, I mean, everyone and their uncle was just telling me, just hit her. Grab this book
Mm.
off Amazon. It's a Christian book. It'll teach you how to use a
Mhm.
switch on them. Make sure they know who's boss. That's how you teach them
Mhm.
healthy authority of God.
Mhm.
Like,
Mhm.
and everyone. And I just remember the misery that I was in. The now I know my nervous system was on fire. The
Mm.
strong reactions that Stella would have, the
Mhm.
stress and drama that I would have when I went to bed at night with tears on my pillow. And I mean, that was so hard on me, you know, like versus the hard that it takes to maybe be 10 minutes late to church because you have to like pause and use empathy, connection, firm limits, and a win-win negotiation or something. Like it's just a different kind of hard, you know,
Oh
but it's
yeah.
all hard.
I can
It's
see
all
that,
hard.
and it's so encouraging to hear people who are farther along than me say that because my daughter is the first and she is very compliant. She is really easy and she has been since
Wow.
she was a newborn. And so of course you think, well, I've got this down. Like, this
Lucky.
parenting works great. I thought my sleep training is great. We did gentle sleep training, but just like she was always great. And then my son came, and from day one, like he was not as great of a sleeper. He's still a good sleeper for the most part, but like not as great as her. And he's been much more challenging than her
Yeah.
and doing the same things with him. And we're like, okay, those same things aren't working. So we've got to get like extra patience, extra compassion and cuddles and time and extra support when he needs it. And it's
Yeah.
draining sometimes. Yeah,
Absolutely.
and
He's a 2-year old.
yes.
Yes, yes, yes. Oh,
Yes.
well.
Don't you talk about like power kids? Is that the term you
Yeah,
use?
he sounds like a
Uh,
power kid. Yeah, or cactus
yes.
kid, you know, like
Okay.
some of
Yeah.
them are orchids, some of them are cacti. And a
Okay.
lot of
And
times the cacti are future leaders, but so are the
okay.
orchids. So,
Well, power kid, I definitely think so. And I think Mary calls them the spicy ones. I'm like, I've
yes.
probably got a spicy one here. And so it takes a lot more patience out of me. But yeah, I'm looking forward to the second decade, as you said, seeing it pay off and just seeing my
Yeah.
children like make good choices and have a strong sense of self and have this strong sense of being loved by God and carrying that with
Mm.
them into the world instead of carrying the rules and the fear that I felt.
Yes, and the shame, right? Like the shame
Hmm.
that comes from being disciplined in a way that your
Yes.
mistakes made you bad and worthy of being hurt. It's
Yeah.
just that takes a long time to shake. I'm sure you helped
Hmm.
so many of your clients through that. It's like shame is, ooh, it is a thick one. And
Hmm.
now we get to have this opportunity to teach kids through healthy, compassionate discipline and firm kindness that mistakes are just opportunities to learn. They're human.
Hmm.
That's all they
Hmm.
are.
Hmm.
They're
And I
just
never wanted to
mistakes.
shame my kids for their personalities either. Like,
Oh, I
I
love,
have to be
yeah.
careful with like my son, being more challenging to not shame that because I was called a strong-willed child. You know that term is like was a religious book, the strong-willed child, and like
Yeah.
so there's like it was used as a judgment. Like there's something wrong with me. And I was called bossy and I'm the firstborn daughter. And it's like now I'm like, would I have been able to do the things that I've done in my life if I wasn't strong-willed and bossy? I don't think
Yes.
that I would. because
Yeah.
it takes a lot to write a book and put your ideas out there and be vulnerable and, invest all that time into possibly getting criticized, and like, I don't think
Yes.
someone who wasn't strong-willed could do it. I don't know. So it's like, can I accept and
Absolutely.
embrace my strong will instead of shaming myself for it?
Which we know is so much the ticket, right? Like as soon as you learn to love yourself more,
Yeah.
you can more easily love them. The better you are at beating yourself up, the better you are at beating them up.
Yes.
Yeah,
Hmm.
Stella, almost 17, she's the one that's like hardcore going for the D1 beach volleyball scholarship. I don't think my
Oh,
second kid will be a kid like that. He
yeah.
probably will be home. I'll probably have to kick him out of the house at like 24. He's my little hip buddy. But Stella, that spirit, it is just translating
Mm.
so well. And
Hmm.
she's going to get it, she's going to get it. It's just when it's like kind of a little bit of torture for a parent because you just have to fist open, wait for it to
Oh, yeah.
happen. But the personality is beautiful. It is beautiful.
Mhm.
And I can see how it has served you so well to get this book out in the world and your work, because I know it took so much work. Dr. Camden, we love you. It is such an honor to platform your work and to have this conversation with you. Will you let listeners know where they can come find the book and where they can come find you and work with you if possible? Let
Mhm.
listeners know.
Yeah, thank you. This was a much more personal interview, so I really loved it because you're just easy to
Good.
talk to. But the book is Recovering from Purity Culture. It's available wherever books are sold. So here it is, Amazon, Baker Book House, which is my publisher. Yes, Wendy's got hers. And you can find me on drcamden.com and on all the socials at Dr. Camden.
Beautiful. I love it. All right. Well, listeners, viewers, thanks for being here today. Thanks for going and giving Dr. Camden some love and getting her book. And we'll see you in the next episode.
Hooray! You made it to the end of a Fresh Start Family Show episode. Thank you so much for being here. If you have a quick second, make sure you hit subscribe to our show so you can be updated when our new episodes drop. I will see you back soon for the next episode. If you are tired of the yelling, the guilt, and the feeling like you're failing as a parent, especially with your strong-willed child, please hear me. There's nothing wrong with you, and there's nothing wrong with your kiddo. Strong-willed kids aren't broken or problem kids who need their wills broken. They're brave, they're spirited, they're here to teach us something powerful. I know myself because I've been raising one for 17 years and she has completely, positively transformed my life. Thanks to this work that has empowered me to see her in an accurate, truthful lens. I'd love to show you how to thrive with your strong-willed kid too, starting now. You can grab my free Quick Start Learning Bundle and choose a time for the interactive workshop at freshstartfamilyonline.com/power. You are not alone and you don't have to figure this out on your own anymore. I'll see you inside your free learning guide and at class very soon.